Greetings, one and all. I'm talking now not to you, Dr. Bouteneff. I'm talking to my usual meager audience, uh,
Mm.
saying hello and wishing them well and inviting them to a new AIOCS conversation. For the record, AIOCS stands for the Australian Institute for Orthodox Christian Studies, which is a fledgling not-for-profit organization which I set up a few years back with my friend Dr. Wagdi Samir, who's Coptic Orthodox, my being Romanian Orthodox. So we try to be as open and ecumenical and fraternal as possible. Um, while most of my conversations in this series refer to matters of, let's call it, gospel and culture or Christianity and society and stuff like that, from time to time, I do conversations on slightly different topics, and as a matter of fact, some of the viewers might know that I'm very interested in promoting feminine voices within the church across the spectrum, but first and foremost in my own church tradition, Orthodox Christianity of, let's call it Byzantine tradition. Hence my guest today. Uh, it's a pleasure, it's an honor to introduce Dr. Patricia Bouteneff, who is the founder and the leader of Axia Women, which is an organization I'll show you in a moment, uh, to places where you can find information. This is the Facebook page of the organization. Yeah. On Facebook, you can get a lot of interesting information there. There's also the website, where again you have information about the structure of the organization. They have a blog. They have a very interesting um rubric, which is the woman of the week, and this is something that happened some years back, isn't it? That's how I got into Axia, actually, and so on and so forth. And of course, you'll have the structure of the organization, and I'm showing this for a good reason. I would like to return to this topic. Of course, the whole leadership is made of women, which is laudable, which is, I think, unique. Yeah? I don't know about St. Phoebe. I haven't checked the governance structures there, but this is awesome. And one other awesome thing is the fact that these women belong to various church traditions. I always find it refreshing when I see Christians being able to shake hands or embrace one another across these boundaries um, drawn by history and politics and culture and so on and so forth, to the extent that most times we forget that we are indeed one, all children of the same God, all disciples of the same teacher. Thank you very much, Dr. Bouteneff, for gracing me and my viewers with your presence. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. It's lovely that you see value in women's voices. It's the reason Axia got started. It's the reason it's a large part of what we do is just making women's voices heard. We try to make sure every woman of the week she's telling her story in her own voice, which is something that for whatever reason is really rare in the church. And I'm just going to put a plug in. We tell some of the best stories you're going to see in the church, you're going to read in the church. Um, so yeah, No, I'm delighted to be here to be able to talk about that.
Wonderful. And yeah, while you warned me that you are a woman of little words,
Mm.
this will be a challenge because I really want you to uh, uh, tell me and the viewers something about yourself first, and then about your organization. So, how did it happen? So, because you have a PhD in Greek studies from
I
Oxford,
do. I
and
do.
you did work for corporations. Then you rescued a couple of parishes from the whatever labyrinth of finance they were and stuff. So tell us something about yourself, please.
It all, looking if I'm gonna, yes, so it sounds a little random, but yeah, I started as somebody who just really loved Greek things and I love literature and I got really interested in Greeks from the Black Sea coast of Turkey. And I was traveling uh anyway, I had a Fulbright to study in Greece in the mid 80s, and while I was doing that, I traveled along the Black Sea, and I ran into an Oxford Don who was interested in the same language, and one thing led to another, and I ended up studying. He was my supervisor for my doctoral work at Oxford, and I was very interested at that time, even then, in women's voices. And so I'd started out working on that subject, and it ended up expanding into a slightly different subject. But then later, uh, when we came back to the United States, there weren't a lot of jobs available in modern Greek studies at the time, and they're even fewer now. So I ended up working under. I met a guy at church who had started a dissertation in Greek history, but ended up at a corporation. And so he ended up hiring me at one of the really giant uh, financial services companies to work in corporate communications. And in the course of that, I became very aware of the power of communications, how you structure communications, got to know a lot about how things are organized in a complex uh, enterprise. Citigroup was at that point in, I'm probably going to lie to you, but I think it was about 160 countries. And just getting a sense of cross-cultural communications at that point. At least my unit was working with about 60 countries at any one time. So as I say, it was very big, it was very complex and very cross-cultural in the way that you had to get used to working with people and their histories. So when that job came to an end after about 10 years, I had some free time and at our um, big parish council meeting shortly afterwards, they were looking for a vice president. And and since I thought vice presidents were useless and it was going to be a, fairly no work kind of job and I needed something to do, I put my hand up, not knowing, and a year later that made me president of the parish. Who knew? But that parish was actually it was 100, at least $100,000 in the red every year. So something desperately needed to be done. So, we had a very small, very determined team that basically turned it around. And by the time we finished, after about 2.5 years of really hard work, it was about $20,000 in the black, which was a major turnaround. Yeah, and I think it's been doing pretty well since then. So yeah, that gave me some pretty major experience. And fortunately that also came to an end just say it's about in 29 early 2019 and I was already working on Axia. I'd already started these meetings, but I was very interested in the course that being president of that parish uh and just seeing what happens when the bishop shows up, just seeing what happens in the course of how things are structured, who gets to be an informal reader, who gets taught to reader, and who, oddly enough, the people who are trained as readers are not necessarily the people who become tonsured as readers. All those sort of things just sort of informed my thinking over time, and sort of seeing how, like, who who was visible, who was audible, in the church services and even in sort of parish council meetings, led to Oxia, but in some ways, but also a one of the we live very close to St. Vladimir Seminary. My husband is a professor there. For some unknown reason, one of his students asked me if I knew the names of some women leaders in the church. So, being an academic who didn't have a lot to do at the time, I sort of gathered the names of the trustees at St. Vladimir's and thought, oh, there's a woman there. I started looking at the names of, like, who sits on the other seminary boards, and got those names. And then I started thinking about other Orthodox women's organizations, and, like, who sits on those boards. And I started gathering those names. And okay, so again, I'm gonna once I start researching something, I can go down that rabbit hole for a really long time. Long story short, I ended up gathering 20 single space pages of women's names who were leaders in the church. And I thought, why don't we know about this?
Mm. Yeah, that's
And then
interesting.
I mean, and I only stopped because I got tired of typing, quite honestly. It was just, it was just like so many women doing so many things in the church. So along the way, one of those women was the leader of a Orthodox Christian Fellowship, which is for Orthodox university students in the United States, and they do a lot of different stuff. But she was also somebody who was a professional program evaluator, which means that she knows a lot about running surveys and things. So I asked her to help me run a survey of these women to find out, like, how they got those positions in the church.
Mm.
Because,
It's
yeah.
interesting. Sorry to interrupt you. Now I have to disclose one of my reasons for inviting you
Mhm.
to speak.
Okay.
Well, of course, it's the pleasure of talking to you finally, after a few years of my browsing your activities.
Mhm.
But the idea is that I don't see that kind of level of feminine participation in the ecclesiastical structures here in Australia. Uh,
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah, see,
Huh.
this is why I find your model there in the States so
Hmm.
interesting because first of all, the Orthodox so-called diaspora churches in
Mm.
Australia are less numerous, less
Mm.
populous, yeah, compared to
Yeah.
the United States, North America, more generally.
Mm.
And in most cases, functions the same old principle of, well, men rule, women shut up,
Mm.
stuff like that. And honestly, I might be wrong,
Mm.
but I haven't heard of women in ecclesiastical leadership in Australia.
Well, I'm not sure this is ecclesiastical leadership per se. I mean, I don't know how your nonprofits are structured. Ours have to have boards of trustees, and somebody has to be on them. And oftentimes, not to put it crudely, women are often willing to do work for free. Sometimes that's the case. But it was partly out of curiosity about how this happens that we ran this survey. And we ended up, and we also surveyed seminary graduates, women seminary graduates, to get a sense of, like, what kind of work that they ended up doing. And something like 200 women responded, and it was interesting. But one of the things that happened, I don't want to go into details about how they got their jobs. There were various ways that happened. But one of the things they kept saying was, we're isolated. We're lonely. We don't have anybody to talk to at the kind of levels that we want to talk about the church with. And we need a network. And as my husband points out, I have a bad habit of saying things like, a wedding, how hard could it be? It's just a party, right? I was like, oh, a network, how hard could it be? Let's do so that was we found a really well, okay. It took work because I knew from the beginning I wanted it that it needed to be a real uh inter-Orthodox thing because in America, there's not that many Orthodox people compared to the rest of the population, right? And so why cut ourselves off? And women are only half of that. So why cut ourselves off from the opportunity to have conversations with, Greeks, Romanians, Coptic women, Armenian women, Indian women? Why would we possibly cut ourselves off? Because we have far more in common than we don't.
Yeah, and
And I
it's
have to,
interesting.
yeah.
So, sorry
Yeah.
again to cut you. Uh, uh, I was amazed to see the governance structure of Axia, with
Pleasure.
women from so many church traditions or Orthodox traditions, Eastern, Oriental, whatever, various races,
Yeah,
which really is for me that's the embodiment of Pentecost.
that's what we
That
try. Yeah, all the
Yeah,
time.
and this is a model that sort of I was about to say beats the crap of. So I won't say that. Uh, 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 actually, exceeds everything that exists here, not only in terms of organizing women together, but in terms of let's call it Orthodox or inter-Orthodox fellowship. So
Hmm.
what you're doing is amazing.
Thank you. And I have to, it does take a lot of work. I mean, and our policies we build our policies around that, honestly. And just in our panel discussions alone, uh, they're very hard to organize. That's why, as we've gotten pulled into doing other things, we're building out events with people in person now. But, all of them, where we're doing events on the ground, we're making sure it's in locations where there are churches on both the Eastern and the Oriental divide so that we can invite people from these different places. I mean, we have these panel discussions, and every single person who participates has to be from either uh, can only come from there can't be more than one of any jurisdiction represented on the panel, right? And at least one person has to come from either an Eastern church or an Oriental church. And the result of doing that is you get to these really, really interesting conversations. There's no in talk. That forces everybody, uh, there's no in group in that case.
Yeah.
Everybody has to talk at a level that's more inclusive. And you find these much deeper levels of agreement by doing that. It's a little bit magical, and I have to and the sheer amount of work it takes to find those folks and to create those events has been remarkable. We've had events like that for like panels built around uh, what it's like to be a church scholar, uh, like what it's like to be a chaplain. I'm forgetting the others right now. We've had like five or six of them, and each of them has had that kind of magic. So I mean, if the churches that you have in Australia have a chance to bring people together across those divides, it has its own magic. But you do have to, you have to have some sense of cross-cultural sensitivities and the rest of it. But those are so worth, meeting and working with. Because
Yeah,
because yeah, because the level of spiritual conversation and support for each other can become so deep so quickly. It's a beautiful thing.
yeah. Especially, in places like your country, this country, um, where the Orthodox of all colors are a minority. Even
Mm,
taken together, they
yes,
are an infinitesimal minority,
exactly.
lost in an ocean of other church traditions, non-Christian
mm,
traditions, no traditions at all. And it's such a pity to see, I don't know what historical feuds still um, scarring
mm,
and obfuscating human interaction and normal
mm,
interaction between all these marginals, you know. And yeah, I have a sense of what you're saying, more from an academic viewpoint with my experience, teaching uh, um, after a stint in a Greek college. I'm now teaching for a Coptic college and an Assyrian
mm,
college.
mm,
You know, what I discover, I know for some people, look, you are a relativist, but what I discover is the fact that all these are people, first of all. Uh,
yeah.
uh,
Yep.
all these people mean enrichment with
Yes.
the different viewpoints.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm much richer now after years of being exposed to other Christian traditions, other Eastern or Oriental traditions than I have been before. And I assume that they also have, with my presence, they have a different sense of what my church tradition means and stuff like that. And there's no chance for walking together towards the kingdom if we
Mm,
still keep apart. So
yeah.
what you're doing again, it's Pentecost
Yeah.
reenacted, you know. Yeah, and t tell me more, or tell us more, uh, including the viewers here, uh,
Mm,
about your activities. I mean, you have some staples there that find amazing. So you mentioned, big events,
mm,
big questions and stuff like that, which, of course, granted, they have their own benefit and stuff like that.
mm,
But, I see the value, the significance of those little things you are doing with introducing the woman of the week, uh,
oh, yes, yes,
or icons and
yes,
prayers by women and so on and so forth. So this is a universe that really is very new for me.
sure. Yeah,
Uh,
it's new
and
for
and and
everybody, I
I'm
think.
certain for many people, even in this country, I repeat, where church structures are very androcentric.
Mm,
I don't want to say misogynistic, although I that's the back of my mind.
mm,
But androcentric, male-centered, and so on and so forth. And this kind of um, affirmation
mm.
of feminine gifts isn't so obvious in Australian Orthodox Christianity.
So, I would say Australia is not that different from the United States in some of the respects that you're talking about, but also, um, yeah, because we wanted to make women's voices heard. And so one of the secrets we have, right, that Axia Woman has is like we know the women in the church, right? We are the women in the church.
You are.
We wanted, yeah, we wanted people to see women because if you look online, if you look like Orthodox women, you get the world. It's such a one note, boring, and I would say utterly inaccurate portrait of what Orthodox women are. And we knew, like we know what women are. We just wanted to show that to people, and we wanted to show that first of all, there's no one Orthodox woman. There's no one way to be. Well, first of all, there's no one way to be Orthodox, and there's no one way to be an Orthodox woman. So we just sort of demonstrated that by just showing uh, all these amazing Orthodox women we know. And you can not, by the way, anybody who wants to nominate an Orthodox woman can do it if it's somebody that she admires, or if she's somebody that you admire. Right now, we're still mostly working with North American women, but it's you know, just the effect. And the other thing I knew was that we wanted the women to be speaking in their own voices because it's just something that doesn't happen. I don't know about in Australia, but it doesn't really happen here. You don't hear women talking about themselves in churches. And the stories were really good. Were just really they're just really extraordinary stories overall. Even the most like most of the women who get nominated of as Women of the Week I'd say 80% of them say, "Oh, there's nothing interesting about me. Why I don't have a story to tell." And you will see over and over again that is, 100% of them do,
Yeah,
right?
and
And
I
so,
like the fact that you showcase
yeah.
aspects of their daily routine. What
Oh,
morning?
isn't it
How do you have
fantastic?
your coffee? When do you pray? How do you pray and stuff like that? It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, what has ended up being happening, I gave actually the monastery in New Ski had me up last August to do one of the talks at their pilgrimage, and I focused on morning routines. And what they observed was actually we have inadvertently, but delightedly, begin to showcase lay spirituality. Normally in the Orthodox Church, you hear a lot more about monastic spirituality. So by focusing on morning routines, we've ended up, you know, building a view of what happens with people in the world and the kinds of prayer lives that they have over time. And that actually led us to sort of going and looking at prayers by women. So that's what we're working on right now. It's actually they're hard to find. We're having an internship. Our first ever is going to be based at St. Vladimir Seminary in August, and the intern is going to be just scouring the place for women's prayers because, as I say, we haven't come across all that many that are named, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there is that trope that anonymous is a woman, so there could be quite a few prayers in the church that were written by women, but we just don't really know about them.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, from the classical Byzantine era, where
Mm,
we hail from as Orthodox, all women voices come to us stifled.
mm,
They are hidden behind the veils of some again male-dominating narrative. And most times we hear about women from men rather than from
mm,
women themselves. So it's very
yes.
rare to hear the voice of a genuine feminine voice from that time.
Mm,
We have, of course, some diaries and stuff like that, but most hagiographical texts, liturgical texts, just tell us how men at the time
mm,
saw women.
mm. Yes, it's true.
So the
There is
problem is old, and it continues
yeah.
to plague us.
Well, that's a pattern. It's hard to break patterns. We're working on it, at least to that extent. You'll be happy to know, by the way, that we've just discovered this really beautiful prayer from I think she was a Romanian princess and became Mother Alexandra
Oh, yeah,
of
yeah.
the
Hmm.
Holy Transfiguration Monastery in Pennsylvania. She did a series of prayers based on the Our Father, and we're about to post that one. And in fact, we'll be doing a reading of it on Substack, I think in next Sunday, probably, if there's anybody who wants to like participate in reading on that one. So if there are any Australian women who would like to be part of that, please feel free to
And could you
sign up.
please provide a link or something, and I'll connect whatever, put it in the comments, whatever.
I'll be happy to at the end of all this. Yeah.
Please.
So yeah, so we're really excited about that, and that's generally coming out bit by bit. So yeah, we really love the morning routine section above all. It's been
What
really
do they
good.
say about Orthodox women in this day and age?
What
Those
what
profiles, those morning routines. Yeah, what do they tell us? Uh, what would be the significance on, let's call it the grand scale of things?
Well, as I said, there is no one way to be an Orthodox woman, and and the other thing I have to say, I mean, it- there is something about the culture wars here that there seems to be an idea that, women somehow hate the church or whatever. It's actually not true. The extra the this I'm not. that there so many women love the church at such a huge depth that they're willing to put up with extraordinary difficulties to
Yeah.
stay in it and extraordinary frustrations. And it takes a lot to drive women away from the church. Um, this is not true of everybody, but I'm just saying that among the women that we talk to, and even the ones that are expressing frustration with the church, they love the church. They really do. Even women who walk away because they feel like they have a call to the priesthood or whatever, or have a calling for in some liturgical role that they can't fulfill, you know, they actually love the church with all their heart and soul. But, if God is calling you to something, you have to be faithful to what God is calling you to. And if you can't do it in the church that you love with all your heart, you have to do it someplace because that's what you have to do. Those women we know of in conversation, they don't end up as women of the week because they're not so orthodox, right? But that's really what I've learned overall, and
Very
and
interesting.
and just
I mean,
how
yeah,
God-centered so many people's lives are.
yeah.
It's
And
extraordinary.
what's
Yeah.
interesting is the fact that indeed, so because this is so difficult to tackle for many Orthodox, clergy of both genders, so
Mm,
that's a taboo sort of topic.
mm,
Um, but what's interesting in what you do at Axia is the fact that you really empower women um, to be noticed. They exist, they work,
mm.
they love the church, they
Yeah.
contribute, they have so many gifts. And as I said earlier about my realizing through exposure to other Orthodox traditions, um, how enriching it is
Yeah.
to realize their own gifts, their own
Mm-hmm.
treasures, and it's the same. I mean, I look at your profiles, and these women uh, really enrich one another, and everyone who is open to listen to these voices, uh,
Mm,
to realize how poor, impoverished we are because we
mm,
don't hear these voices. We don't want to listen to these voices, regardless of where this conversation might lead. Will it lead at some point at a different perception of what makes a good clergy person, a good
mm,
servant of the church? Um,
mm,
how relevant is the gender of a person in terms of serving God and God's people? Um,
mm,
and I noticed that what you are doing is more of laying the building blocks of something that is profound and can
mm,
be, hopefully not on a long run, on a shorter term, can be, ground shattering in terms of the acknowledgement that the church and all of us members of the church uh, should should give to women.
mm. I actually would even argue that it would be great for the church to listen to people, period, a little more. Just lay people, you know? Yeah, I would love it, obviously, if the church would listen to women, but I I don't feel like what we're doing is enough, but I'm happy to say that because Axia exists, there's at least one corner of the church that does listen to women and finds women's voices valuable. I feel like it's hard to say now that there's no place in the church that values women's voices because at least we do, right? And but I sort of feel like it would be invaluable to just listen to people at some sort of level that there's no time for. And part of me feels like so many of the people who are official in the church, uh, either they're not really trained for their job. I know that priests get their master's degree and so forth, but at least as far as I can tell, most clergy and hierarchs have never been trained for leadership. They're in these jobs that end up being overwhelming. They don't really have the time or training to figure out how to deal with this huge crowd of needy people. And the more complicated and frightening the world gets with all the things that, are hitting everybody politically and in terms of climate and things changing and economies here and there tanking and whatever the politics that are getting us all roiled up and making things more difficult, it makes it harder for everybody to hear each other because everybody's becoming needier. And I don't even when I think about so I was at at a parish last time we were at a parish, it only had maybe 40 people who'd show up on a regular basis. That's still 40 people to one priest, right? And and some of these parishes here, maybe they have about two priests for 300 people or more, or 300 families. It's just I can't even imagine, and sort of with one of the reasons that I think that places like St. Phoebe Center for the Deaconess is doing such extraordinary important work is because the idea of reviving a diaconate where you can more people are there to just help more people, just to be there for them and listen. I mean, deacons, in my understanding, are really there to help create the social services that need to happen in
Yeah, as
churches.
we see in
Priests aren't
the Book
trained.
of Acts, it's all
Right, yeah. So I mean,
scratch. Yeah,
right. So just that alone would make a huge difference. Male or female deacons, just whatever it takes. The church is just doesn't. So anyway, that's what I'm saying is the church doesn't have the resources it needs to really listen to people. So if you have that's one thing that at least with us, you know, we're we're doing a small job of listening to people on a small scale, and so if that helps, I don't think that often we our one of the week don't often talk about need and all that. Like that's not they're there to talk about how they ended up doing their jobs, which often have to do with meeting people's needs. But yeah, so that's a lot of what I'm seeing, you know. I would love I think there's so much work to be done in the church that it's to my mind a waste not to use every resource that you
yeah,
can
yeah.
possibly turn to good. Um,
It's
but yeah, that's yeah.
a topic to which I return from time to time, including in
Yeah.
my published diary, uh,
Mm,
which is hated by many Orthodoxists,
mm,
where I speak upfront of the fact that what we do in terms of living out of
mm,
ministry or all sorts of service,
mm,
the gifts of Christian women would have as an equivalent a creation, a universe that, under the breath of the Holy Spirit,
mm,
would refuse to breathe in
mm,
that energy, life-giving energy of the Spirit, claiming to be self-sufficient. And as we know from the Psalms, where the Spirit isn't, everything crumbles. I would say that it goes the same for the Orthodox Church by leaving out um, all these parts where the Holy Spirit breathes and these parts, these elements, these members
mm,
of Christ's body are kept out as though they are useless. So this is somehow an ecclesial vision I have where
mm,
what you call listening is the beginning, from my viewpoint, the beginning of something that can be called synergy, which is
Mm,
the very life of the church. Without synergy, and I noticed in your Axia, let's call it platform program, you speak of sobornost, this conciliarity, this bringing together, coming together to work together, which is what I call synergy. And it's
mm,
impossible to reach that goal without listening to one another, including men listening to women and the other way around. Well, usually that's
yeah,
happening willy-nilly because usually men scream, shout, all that
yeah.
from the ambo or from the pulpit or from whatever the other place where they
Mm.
sing, and women have to cope with that.
I will also say that the most recent reading, what was it on Sunday, took from from not the reading of the gospel, took from the end of the Beatitudes had have to do with, letting your light shine and not putting it under a bushel, right? It's pretty clear in that if we don't, it's pretty, at least in my reading, Christ is saying not to have your light shine is a sin. And the bushel basket that goes over it, like whatever is causing, whatever is that bushel, whatever's preventing your light from shining for the good of the church is sinful, right? And the other point is a city on the hill is it shines because of all these little points of light that make up all of us, right? That's what we're aiming at, is to have each of us have our light shine fully to meet the calling that God has for each of us to do the good that we're meant to be doing. That's what creates the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah, to
And
unbury the talent.
right, and by the way, he is talking, he's talking in the Sermon on the Mount. Yeah, I know you know this. Like he's talking to men and women and children, all of them. He's not saying, "Oh, it's just you guys who are supposed to having your light shine." It's all of us meant to be having our light shine for
Yeah,
everybody else. And that's what creates the magic. That's what creates the city on the hill. That's the kingdom of heaven.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that is a really important thing to keep in mind as we go forward.
Patricia, I have a question which you might not like to answer, to respond to. I noticed in the last few weeks, perhaps it's an
Mm,
older thing, but I don't actually keep a tab on Orthodox things.
mm,
Honestly, I stay away from
okay.
this kind of stuff as much as humanly possible. Yeah. Anyway, um, but I noticed something that looks to me like a very strange um, return to an androcentric stance of the church, especially in North America, with certain priests, various jurisdictions,
Mm,
claiming that Orthodoxy restores the lost manhood of North American males. Um, and look,
yeah.
I look. So I've seen declarations
I
made
didn't
by
know it was lost.
priests.
Okay, fair, but I didn't know the manhood was lost. But all right, let's go ahead. And
Whatever.
yeah, okay.
Well, if they need to
Yeah,
restore it maybe, or
yeah,
retrieve it, maybe it
yeah,
was lost. But
yeah.
that was my sorry,
Uh-huh.
my conclusion, or
Mm,
maybe it's wrong. But
mm,
there's priests preaching this, proclaiming this, that Orthodoxy
yeah.
restores manhood, and uh, I wonder how do you feel? Have you had a chat with your sisters in Axia or other
Mm.
organizations about this turn of events? How do you see this kind
Um,
of message, this orthodoxist message?
so my understanding is it's been going on for at least a couple of years now. We don't track it very hard because we're sort of more interested in it, manhood isn't really our subject, right? I mean, the most recent that I've heard of is someone is saying that a priest is saying, not from the Amvon, but on YouTube, is saying that women should not be allowed to raise men. to adulthood, and I'm curious about how he pictures, children being raised to adulthood otherwise. And I'm just, trying to figure out, you know, the Theotokos our epitome of womanhood raised Christ to perfect manhood. Yeah,
There they
thank
are.
you. To be
There
the
they are.
perfect man.
Yeah.
And the other thing to keep in mind, what I come back to on occasion is like, so most male saints actually to become saintly end up taking on, characteristically sort of more feminine characteristics to become more holy, and vice
Being
versa. Like
able
women,
to cry, to feel empathy, to feel compassion.
right? All those things, and to lay out care for other people, right? And to really and take on caretaking roles of various kinds. And then you have what women saints, right, who are meant to be our prototypes, and most of them end up taking on more stereotypically male traits. They become bolder, they speak out more, they take hard stances, they don't just fold, right? So I get the sense that these people who are have somehow decided that manhood has been lost. I don't know why they've decided that. I really don't. Are haven't been paying a lot of attention to what, I'm not trying to score points on them and anything, but like the messages we get from the church are very different from these secular notions of what manhood is, right? It's a very secular stance, actually, what they're advocating. It's not orthodox, and I don't know really where they're getting it from, because again, it's not my I do know people who study it. They could probably tell you, but as I say, it's not our subject, and it's kind of a topic I hope will die a natural death at some point in the not too distant future, because it's a distraction from what Christ and the church are actually calling us to.
Yeah, yeah, but I really feel for Christian women when
Mm,
I hear this kind of message, and I wrote the other week a little something against this what I call with Father George Florovskis' words pseudomorphosis, and I have been already bombarded by priests in
mm,
Australia who consider me a feminist, as though that's a mortal
mm,
sin.
mm,
And I take their male pride
mm,
of the picture as though that's Christianity about it. So I agree with you that Christianity isn't about that, isn't about
mm.
affirming a certain gender. Uh, it's about traveling together. Uh,
Yeah, it's not about assertions of power
yeah,
either.
yeah,
What I find bizarre in so much talk about church is like, who's grabbing this power, who wants that power. Living out your life in Christ and letting your light shine, it has nothing to do with power. It has everything to do with trying to create this kingdom of heaven, which we are called to do, you know? So yeah, that Pentecostal notion of everybody, being able to be in conversation and seeing each other, and having actually, now you mention it, the icon of Pentecost, everybody's got their little light shining on top of their head. It's a lovely thing,
yeah,
you know? I think sometimes people forget there should be joy in church, and not all these little power
yeah.
struggles
Yeah,
or big
it's
power struggles.
the war of the sexes
Mm,
transferred from the secular society into
yeah.
the church. Yeah,
Mm,
because most of them even forget why the church has evolved historically as a
mm,
male-dominated organization, which is really contrary to the earliest Christian experience, as we see in the New Testament. We see a very uh, socially revolutionary message,
mm,
but message which had to be somehow moderated given the circumstances of Roman patriarchalism, where
mm,
the church, in order not to draw too much attention, coming up with a social paradigm that was more favorable to women, slaves, the
Mm,
destitute, the marginalized, and so on and so forth, had to put on the male patriarchal garb. But we forget
mm,
that this is just a matter of circumstantial adjustment to a certain society that function in that way. And
mm,
Christians didn't want to, cut whatever it's called, the branch from their feet or whatever the
mm,
saying goes, to fall from the picture. But now we have transformed that historical circumstantial adjustment into a norm. And we
mm.
consider that the church is the stage where only Elvis can sing, not Madonna or whatever, who's the equivalent.
I think you got Taylor Swift these days. So
Oh,
yeah.
okay, well, so yeah. Anyway, well, Dr. Bouteneff, thank you so much for sharing beautiful insights, so profound
Thank
about
you for having me. This was a
your
delightful
organization,
conversation.
your activity. Um, I can only pray that um, your organization and all your activities flourish more and more so that the entire church, the entire body of Christ can profit from your gifts, from your
Thank
contribution.
you. Thank you very much. And I hope I have a chance to meet you in about a month on your shores.
Wonderful. Looking
Yeah.
forward to it. Thanks a lot.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure.